We're here today with Alanna Kit, one of the co-founders of ARC, a psychedelic neuroscientist, which is a fantastic title. I'm sure we'll come on to that. Right. Talk us through your journey into the world of sauna. How did you discover it? Tell us your first sauna and what made you decide to have a career in this amazing space.
I mean, I think sauna just found me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's also like in my gene pool.
Okay.
I'm Ukrainian by background. Both sides of my parents are from the west side of Ukraine. So the banya is like woven into our culture.
Yeah.
And I grew up with a cedar sauna actually in Canada.
Amazing.
My parents have it in the basement. And so that was always kind of like our communal space on weekends. And especially with the snow, we'd go snow rolling and just like cycle between the hot tub. And we've also gone like in the pond for cold plunging and stuff. So yeah.
So you probably couldn't remember your first sauna then? Or?
I mean, when we built our house, it's in the forest. It's on like a 60-acre property, and it's like a hobby farm. We are very Canadian and make our own maple syrup and hunt on the land and have like a hobby garden and such. So I grew up very close to the earth and climbing trees, and nature was always interwoven into my life. Forest kid. Yeah, and I think those natural elements transfer so nicely into the sauna culture because we're playing a lot with the earth elements. And it was always a beautiful piece of coming together for our family.
So was it something that as a kid you were like, oh, what's this weird thing? Like, we're going to sauna, or were you super psyched up for it?
I loved it.
Yeah? I
loved it. I also run pretty cold, so I love the heat. Yeah, you either love the heat or you love the cold, I find. That's kind of like overlaid into the Ukrainian Canadian roots. Just always staying warm in the winter. Yeah. And it brings a sense of like familial togetherness, commune.
And then in later life, you've kind of tell us a little bit about what's kind of triggered it now, like you doing your studies or? Yeah,
so I started working at Othership. I was friends with the founders and taught on their breathwork app.
So for context, Othership, Toronto-based, big public sauna, right?
Yeah, they were like great first movers in the sauna boom during COVID. And so it was really great to work with them, and it was nice to learn the Aufguss tradition with them, because they went to Europe and learned it, and then brought it back to Canada and wove that into their practice, which was lovely. It was nice to like start working with them in Toronto, and I'd also been teaching breathwork, meditation, and yoga for about 8 years now. Wow. So I learned a lot of these modalities back in India. Okay. And this kind of goes into the psychedelic neuroscience, exercise science, consciousness, spirituality tunnel that I've been in for the past decade. Yeah. And
whereabouts in India were you studying?
I studied in Goa, so the south, and I was there for about 4 or 5 weeks. But it was a really great, comprehensive way of studying this ancient wisdom. And, we learned Ayurveda and yogic philosophies, and then I found like a lot of connections between the consciousness and spirituality aspect and just understanding Eastern philosophies. Then I went down a tunnel of like traditional Chinese medicine. And so I just started becoming way more fascinated with ancient ritual and even Ukrainian ritual. I grew up, Ukrainian Catholic, and we had a lot of like, or still do, like a lot of Christmas traditions and a lot of like herbalism and botany that's like really interwoven in our culture. So I just found a lot of crossovers with that. And then from India, I was about to start my master's, but I didn't know what I wanted my thesis to be on. And so from India, I was really inspired, and I found in my own practice, I'd been practicing yoga since I was 15 and doing triathlons, and that was the best form of physiotherapy for me in recovery was yoga.
Yeah.
And so it went from the body and studying the body, and I did my master's in exercise science, physiology, biomechanics, anatomy. I did like a human dissection. I was obsessed with the body.
Yeah.
And learning about the musculature, the vasculature, and then I did my thesis on a yoga program for athletes.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, I finished my master's, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life.
Like so many.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, thinking about like, I looked into chiropractic, I looked into naturopathy because I was really on the natural health wave. Something about conventional medicine didn't satisfy me.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt like there was a lot more to discover from what conventional medicine taught us.
Yeah.
Even during my master's, we were talking about the shortcomings of holistic health promotion in the medical system. And during my master's, I had heard the word hormesis for the first time as well. And that is the common thread between all of this, of everything that I've studied so far.
For context for the listeners, what is hormesis?
Yeah, hormesis is known as like a healthy stress that causes an adaptation in the body. And examples of this are exercise, breathwork, sauna, ice bath, psychedelics,
mm-hmm.
meditation, things that cause a temporary discomfort that your mind and body has to overcome to then adapt. And it causes a cellular cascade and leads to resilience and adaptation.
It's interesting the of that list, some of those things listeners might associate with being more relaxing rather than a stressful stress. So is there do you know the mechanisms that some of these I know we've discussed like cold and heat in the past, but
yeah.
I'm interested about how you could be causing this hormesis during breath work or meditation, etc.
Yeah, so breath work, I mean, depending on the breath work, like I was trained in pranayama in India, which is like ancient breath work, and then also transformational breath work. Depending on the type of breath work, because it could be upregulating for the nervous system and it could be downregulating. So if you're inducing your sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight, you're going to have norepinephrine and cortisol output temporarily. And with that temporary output, that's going to cause focus and a rush of adrenaline.
And so that would be what, like panting or like
breathing deeper.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it's going to create that temporary stress response that we're evolutionarily primed to have.
Mm-hmm.
It serves its purpose. I actually don't look at cortisol badly if it's in balance, right? It's something that we need. But if it's out of balance, like we have a lot of chronic stress inflammation in our lifestyles right now, that's out of balance.
Yeah.
Right? It's not in moderation. And so hormesis is looking at a moderate amount of stress that causes an adaptation. And so when I finished my master's, I was like, what am I doing with my life? I don't like anything I see in the job market. And through my own personal health journey, mental health, just going through my own personal journey, I came across psychedelics. Actually, the book, Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, ended up on my doorstep with some microdoses.
Yeah. And that
right when COVID hit.
Right.
I was like, this is the perfect time to dive in deep.
Yeah.
And I was on my family farm because, didn't want to be in the city during lockdowns and stuff.
During the apocalypse.
Yeah. And so I took a microdose and just went in the forest, and I was like, ooh. It was a familiar feeling, a place I went to when I was in India doing yoga nidra or doing breath work. It was this expanded state of consciousness and awareness, a place I went to during meditation. So I felt like I had snippets of psychedelic experiences naturally through my own practice and breath work. And so, yeah, I just started to become way more interested in alternate states of consciousness. Even got there during a sauna experience too. When you push yourself past that point of discomfort or past that point of comfort, you get into this liminal space. Experienced it in a Temazcal in Mexico. So there's all these common threads that I found. I was like, I have to explore this more. So from there, I then worked for a psychedelic startup and did clinical trial and drug development, learned the whole pharmaceutical pathway. And then I went back into academia and started studying psychedelic neuroscience. While I was working for the startup, I was also working at Othership and teaching my class, teaching a lot of breath work during COVID. I taught a lot on Zoom. And so this is the common thread of my life is exploring different levels of consciousness and awareness to reach higher states of consciousness, but also how to integrate that into your daily life to optimize it.
So Othership entered in the time frame where you're already on this kind of road to discovering what you wanted to do next. And was it just that it cropped up right place, right time? Like, where were you? What were you doing when you came across it and you wanted to get involved?
Yeah, I was like already teaching a lot of breath work. And yeah, and I knew the founders, and they were also, starting their breathwork app. So I did a bit of recording with them, and then they asked for me to teach at Othership. And yeah, just kind of blossomed from there.
And then how long did you work there?
I was there for about 2.5 years. And then when I started my PhD, I moved to the west coast of Canada, and just dove deep into research and led my own kind of breathwork and meditation microdose events on the west coast.
Were you without sauna on the west coast, or did you?
No,
you managed to find.
I always found a sauna. Like the sauna's literally
when it's in your blood.
Me.
That's it. You end up.
You just got a scent for it. You can sniff it out.
Yeah, and people would always be inviting me to like different saunas,
Nice.
And friends of mine have I was telling you earlier, they have a beautiful floating sauna on the lake. There's a lot of wood burning sauna on the lake, right? And even up on Vancouver Island, up in Tofino, there's some beautiful saunas on the ocean, and it's a beautiful part of Canada. Yeah, beautiful culture that's forming in Canada, because it makes sense with our.
Oh, I mean, it's exploding,
climate, right?
Yeah, I mean, World Sauna Forum. 5 years ago, there was one Canadian, Alan from Kivia, who is now the ambassador for Sauna from Finland, and a fantastic advocate for sauna. And this year, from what I gather, there's like 30 or 40 Canadians coming from to the World Sauna Forum in Finland. So It's really growing. And I think obviously UK, Norway, USA, Canada, Japan are all big growth markets for wellness and well-being. And obviously Canada is one of those places where you're like, and it's probably the British fault, but it's one of those places where you're like, to live there, you should have this. Like
100%.
It's so cold for so long that having access to sauna is just massively improve your quality of life. UK is the same. I mean, you go up to Scotland, there are places in Scotland where you're like, the sauna should be here everywhere. This, it's.
But also from like a purist point of view, anyone that's chasing the sauna dragon, they everyone's kind of favorite sauna stories usually involve a very naturalistic setting. And so, I've never been to Canada, but everything I see just sounds, if I close my eyes, I'm imagining myself there, but in the context of like a sauna on the shore of a lake.
In Max's mind, though, he's in like Northwest Territories.
Yeah. For sure.
Not downtown Vancouver.
You know our provinces.
Well, you know,
Yeah.
we had maps at school. So
but also like they're it's woven into our indigenous culture too, right? There's
sweat lodges.
There's sweat lodges, North American sweat lodges, Mesoamerican sweat lodges.
And actually, there's a book I read during my studies called A Journey to the Northern Ocean, which was written by an explorer called Samuel Hearn. And in that, he talks about coming across Inuit communities where they had essentially houses which had like almost like a U-bend. So they go underground, along a tunnel, up, and then down again. And it stopped breezes coming in. And he goes in there and he's like, everybody's naked, everybody's sweating. And this guy's trying to explain coming across essentially a sweat lodge, but not understanding what it is. And through the lens of like a 17th or 18th century explorer, this is just the most bizarre thing ever. And, you know, so that culture was there and vibrant. And obviously, you know, sadly, due to, colonialism, a lot of that has been sort of lost or sort of deconstructed. Hopefully it still clings on in places.
I think there's a huge remembering happening, right? And the theme within all of this is now, you know, we have modern technology and scientific rigor to back up all of this mysticism and ancient intelligence, right? And we're finding we're at this pivotal point in the world right now where we need to remember this in order to survive and merge these two languages that come from similar origins, right? So we're remembering a lot of our roots and finding the importance of ritual and ceremony and the intelligence of mysticism and, you know, even roots of spirituality.
I mean,
right?
Oral history is, before written history, oral history in communities around the world is integral to those. And we find that where something happens to break that link, those communities died out. So that oral tradition and oral history that's passed down through generations is really important. And when we look at industrial culture, it's only about 250 years old, you know, in the hundreds of, 80 to 100,000 years of human evolutionary history. There's this tiny blip of time where, you know, people on boats went around and were like, no, you're doing it all wrong. Get rid of all of this stuff. We should do everything this way. And everyone's gone, okay, yeah, fine. This is how the world works now. And actually the world is so tumultuous, changes all the time. And, you know, sweat bathing is one of those things where actually it's been done for millennia. It's an important part of well-being and wellness. We know it from modern medicine, but we've known it for thousands of years. So, and only because some prude guys on a boat turned up and said, "Oh, you shouldn't be doing this. Put some clothes on." Like, and we've kind of, everyone's gone, all right, they've got guns. We should probably do what they say. And then you're completely right. You know, we're now going, hang on a second. We probably didn't have all the answers back then.
Right.
You know.
So big ego death happening right now.
Exactly. To use a psychedelic analogy.
Yeah. Well, also in the psychotherapy sphere. So the fact that you're studying psychedelic, studied psychedelic
Still studying.
Studying.
Yeah.
Still in the
In
middle.
progress?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're going back to do your PhD.
I still am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I loved to bring back up How to Change Your Mind. If you're wondering whether or not to commit to buying the book, there's a multi-part series on one of the streaming services. I can't remember which it is now.
Probably Netflix.
Probably. But I loved that there was the whole counterculture. It was the war on drugs was just really kind of weaponized to take on the counterculture, and unfortunately, all the psychedelic research just stopped when Nixon kind of clamped down on that. And here we are again in this rediscovery, this remembering, trying to pick up where they left off.
Yeah, there was a dormancy. But I think, I mean, this is my own theory, I don't think the world was ready for a psychedelic boom at that time.
Do you know what's interesting? So when we had Mikkel on the podcast, and this is something we've talked about a few times, is like he talks about in the 70s, sauna started becoming this big thing, big community saunas. And then he talks about the AIDS epidemic happened, and nobody knew how it was being spread, but they knew that gay communities were going to these saunas, and then the AIDS was spreading. And he said overnight all these bathhouses closed down. Nobody was going to them because they were scared that they might get AIDS because they didn't know how it was transmitted.
Right.
And he said only now does it feel like we're back on the same level of trajectory that we were. And he talks about it being like this like kind of linear or exponential growth, and then it died a death, and then time has elapsed, and then we've kind of gone back to where we were, and it's now carrying on.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that the timing on that is like the war on drugs.
Yeah.
Right? It's, into the 70s, then hang on a second, let's put a big stop on this.
There's a time for a bit of kind of scientific and medical enlightenment to catch up before actually...
a renaissance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The sauna renaissance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there, like I said, there's so many crossovers between psychedelics, sauna, breathwork, meditation, all of which are causing an increase in neuroplasticity.
I generally say to people, if you go to sauna, and particularly if you're new to it, and given that sauna is in its relative infancy, I would say it's so important to listen to your body when you're in the sauna.
Yeah.
You don't want to dull any of those senses. And that's the same for drugs, alcohol, everything. Like you got to go in there. And for me, some days I only want to stay in 5 to 10 minutes in the hot room. And that's maybe if I'm feeling a little bit down or unwell, my immune system's not as strong, or I could be feeling a little bit overwhelmed or whatever. And sometimes I'll be in there like 45 minutes. And it's all just like listening to my body. And so my, fully on the record, my advice to anybody is like, if you're going to sauna, like, and, it shouldn't be early on in your sauna journey to try microdosing in the sauna. But that said, you go to Finland, and the number of saunas in Finland I've been to where, blind drunk Finns have gone to sauna. So, and
it's woven in the Ukrainian Russian culture,
of course,
absolutely.
Yeah, shot
part
of vodka, and and I'd be a complete hypocrite if I said I'd never, drunk alcohol and gone to sauna, because that's 100% been done.
Yeah, I think it's intuitive based, and I think this is another piece that I really want to overlay at ARC is like coming back to our intuitive knowing, stripping away the watches, taking off the clothes,
the jewelry, the symbols of prestige,
right? Taking away the time. We specifically don't have a clock in the sauna because that adds a layer of potential placebo or decision making that it's an external piece, right? And I really want to come back to our true nature and our true intuition and knowing, and just closing the eyes, tuning into the body and seeing what it needs, right? And finding your edge.
Yeah.
And moving one needle past the discomfort and seeing where you get to, but playing within those spaces.
Yeah.
To find your potential.
The sauna is a sort of place, particularly with sauna and cold plunge. We've spoken to people on the podcast about this before, but it's something that you can get to, just like with yoga, just like with meditation. It's something that you can get to the euphoria of drugs and the psychedelia of drugs without ever needing to take drugs. And some of my I've had in fact that the most powerful sauna-based psychedelic experience I've had was in a Slavic banya in Minnesota last year. These guys, we went in, did a full banya session, and it was like, it builds you up, you get hotter and hotter, then it's cold, then you're back in, and they're building it and building it and building it, and whisking and all this sort of stuff. And it very quickly goes through what you would normally consider as like your body saying, okay, this is okay, this is when I need to go. But you're there with a banya master who is there to look after your well-being, and their whole thing is just like, just trust me and stick with this. And I remember when I went to my final cold plunge there, and I was just like, I was just gone. I was in that other dimension.
Definitely.
And the only similar experience I've had in the past was, and this is an India story, I went to a hot springs in the Himalayas at a place called Kia Ganga, which is about 4,000 meters up in the Himalayas, and it's a natural hot springs, and it's about the hottest you could bear a bath if you get into it. And I was in there for ages with my mate, and when I got out, I'm pretty resilient to fainting, so I don't really faint. But I got out, and I had, to me, it was quite a unique experience because, as I say, I don't really faint very often. But, full tunnel vision down to pixelated black and white vision to being right on the border of consciousness. So I could hear but for about 2-3 minutes, I just collapsed where I stood on myself. And my mate was like, "What are you doing? Like, what are you doing?" And I was talking. I was like, I can't even move. I can't even get up. And it was a combination of hypoxia, altitude, and being like vasodilation for so long.
Right.
And yeah, it was bizarre, but it felt amazing. So, and going to the spiritual aspect of it, this is supposed to be one of the 3 places that Shiva manifests in the world. And so I'm not particularly spiritualistic, but there were plenty of Indians who were like, this is a connection, a spiritual connection. So I was like, okay, whatever. I just had a head rush and fainted. But it was quite special. And obviously you're up there, you see the backdrop of the Himalayas, and it was
it's a
special.
peak experience.
It was, and I think that's it. Not everybody wants that every time they go to the sauna, but those kind of experiences where you're really, somewhere on the cusp of consciousness are interesting, and I think psychedelic for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be interesting to know what's going on in my brain. Probably just having a minor stroke, just like part of my brain just shutting down. So, but yeah, it was
turning off for a bit.
Yeah. So tell us how you went from this. You're working with the ARC, and you're here now in the UK, founding ARC. Like, what happened? How did that happen?
Well, yeah, it's
You work with Chris Miller from White Rabbit Projects.
It is a funny story. I'll give it like a quick story of it.
Yeah.
I'd been wanting to open a wellness center for about 8 years. Ever since I came back from India, I was having so many visions and ideas, and like, even though I'm in like science and academia, I still call myself a creative because I have so many ideas that come to me daily. And I consider it to be the art of science because that's the way I go about it. But I had been wanting to open a center for a long time, and I had an idea of how I would like to translate it, but I tried to do it like 3 or 4 times in Canada with different groups, and it just didn't happen for different reasons. And, doing it on the side of academia and working and holding space in the wellness center. And I was doing my PhD. I was actually leading a psychedelic retreat when Chris reached out to me, and we were connected by a mutual friend, and he reached out to me on Instagram. He's like, "Pardon the message on Instagram, but I have an idea that I'd want to run past you." And by that time I was already jaded. I was like, okay, I've had a lot of people reach out to me for free information and like, and whatnot. I was like, I'm not going to talk to you unless you pay me like a consulting fee.
Yeah.
I don't want to like engage in this. He's like, no, it's not for consulting. Like, I have an idea and I'm trying to build out a team. And so I chatted with him, and within 5 minutes we had like a huge alignment with this idea.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, I came out to London and met with the team, and I really, really liked the way his team operated. Before I came out, though, I was super cutthroat. I was like, okay, I've tried this before. I know what works. I know what doesn't work. I asked him 3 questions. I said, do you have a space? He was like, yes. I was like, do you have a team that can execute? He's like, yes. And I was like, okay. Do you have the money for it?
Yeah.
I was like, yeah. I'm like, the reality is you need all those 3 things. I was
It's
like,
true.
okay, now I'll talk.
Yeah.
And
we speak to a lot of people who have that amazing ambition.
Yeah.
And it is an amazing dream to bring what you guys have brought with the ARC. But they don't have those things.
Yeah.
And if
and it's
even
just,
one's missing,
Exactly.
it's not going to work.
You need the right mixture in the pot. And yeah, I found like he has what I don't have and I have what he doesn't have, and it's a beautiful mixture, and he's good at finding artists and creatives with ideas, and I found that working with his team and doing workshops of creative concepts, and I'd been thinking about this for a long time of how to bring out ancient wisdom and having the right energy in the space. And I've always thought about how, from a leadership perspective, how I'd want to hire people and be a space of co-collaboration and co-creation and such. But mainly like through the creative process, it was just really fun to bring about the natural elements and the feminine elements within the space, and the biophilic design, and coming up with the name ARC. We came up with it when I first flew out to London last winter, and we were brainstorming different concepts and talking about bridging the gaps between science and ancient wisdom, and we came up with ARC, and even Noah's Ark,
Of course.
into this new world, right? And so the creative process was really fun.
Yeah.
And then, finding the location, working with you guys on the design, and it's just been really surreal to see this.
So for the context of anybody who doesn't know, and, it is new, but a lot of people already really, it's trailblazing. So a lot of people already know about it and what's going on. But what is ARC? Not just physically, but what's going on there, what's involved, and what could somebody expect if they turned up at the ARC?
So because of you guys, working with you, we've built UK's biggest sauna, so it fits 65 people. The opening party, we fit more.
I've seen more than
we
65
a few
in
more
there
to make it really fun.
Yeah.
And we also have 8 ice baths, and one of our main pillars is education, how to optimize and take autonomy over your health. And so I've had a great run of building out the programming, the education. It's really important to me to empower the team and the staff within the space, and the onboarding materials, and educating everybody on the traditions of sauna, the history of it, so that we can honor these traditions, and then also be educated on the scientific benefits. But yeah, so we have like classes overlaid within the space, and my favorite piece is actually the workshops that we're building out and the collaborations with different groups in London. So it's just a creative space. We're merging art and music and wellness and medicine. Like it's a beautiful space of community. The biggest piece of ARC is community and connection.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where, and as an archaeologist by my degree, and something we end up talking about quite a bit on the podcast, is like, what I quite like about it, and these kind of things that you've kind of touched on, is there's an element of it which reminds me of, and I'm sure some listeners will just think this is kind of a bit off the wall, but if you look at the temple culture of Malta, which is super ancient, it makes the pyramids look new, right? What's interesting about the temple culture in the Neolithic of Malta is, firstly, in the Neolithic everywhere else, we find lots of interpersonal violence in skeletal remains. In Malta, none, right? Secondly, they have what they call the goddess culture, which is they have these big statues of very large, what we would consider overweight women everywhere, right? And so there's theories about this being a very female-led society, but their structure of the way that they build their temples is 3 to 4 niched alcoves that get smaller towards the end. And one of the things that I really like about the ARC is the way that you're going through that transformational journey. So you go in, You get into that changing room space, and that's like where you prepare yourself. And then you've got the next space, which is the kind of the lounge, meditative, breathworky kind of space.
The womb cocoon.
Yeah, and then
That's cool.
and then we go then we go into the sauna space, and then the
Yeah.
final bit is that transformational cold plunges with the brass monkey cold plunges.
Yeah.
And I just love the way that it kind of mirrors that. And whilst of course we don't know what was going on in these temples, we do know that the way that they're laid out is all about the going through several stages that go towards
The chambers,
this. Yeah,
the atrium.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I just absolutely love that, and I love the idea that designing the space around that journey, there's something about it that just kind of feels right. And that's what, when I first went to and I wasn't involved in the design from our side. We've got a fantastic team, and Max and Alex heavily involved in that. But what I loved was just going there and being like,
Seeing it for the first time.
I was like, this is like, it makes all of this just kind of makes sense the way that it flows, and I just think that that's great. From what a customer could expect when they turn up, like, talk us through, like, what does a normal session at the Arc look like?
Yeah. I do want to go back to what you were just talking about.
Sorry, yeah, all right, we'll put a pin in that one. We'll go back to this one.
Your background here, because it's so applicable to the ideology and the vision behind ARC, because I studied a lot of like ancient civilizations and what happened within those communities. And now we can go back to the pin and explain the process.
Sorry, yeah.
Go on.
Do the process. I was going to say, in actually designing and creating that, was that something that Chris and you sort of had quite a lot of input and carte blanche, were able to sculpt this journey, as Jake's highlighted? Or
yeah, we took so much time between myself, Chris, Matt, the creative director, and Cake, the architecture studio that we worked with. There was so much back and forth around the vision and the customer experience and the flow between these atrium and the lounge space being just so central to community and communing around the monolithic altar that Chris's uncle in Wales made, right? So it just all came together so beautifully. But I've always been obsessed with conversation pits. Before TVs were a thing, everyone would just be in
You're
this,
a big fan of a conversation pit,
you're just stepping down and you're coming together and it's cozy and there's just so much creativity that you can do with that. And I just saw that as a beautiful piece to build out.
Going back to that on the design as well, another thing that I really like about the Arc is it's so unassuming at the start. So it says a lot about a venue when the commercial aspect of it. Okay, so you have to turn up, you have to pay for your ticket. This is, as much as it would be great for it to be a free charity for everybody, the thing has to make money and obviously be maintained and upkept and everything else. But that is a tiny bit of it. Whereas if you go to, a hotel, for example, the bit where you pay is huge. And it's all about the money, right?
Right.
Whereas actually here, it's like
a small. If we were to describe it, it's not maybe the best format to picture something, but you turn up at the reception desk.
It's like a cinema, isn't it? It's like there's a little thing where you get your ticket.
Yeah.
There's a very unassuming, very small.
You can only really see as far as the changing room from that point.
And then the rest of it is
a curtain in front of the changing room now, so it's like, what am I
fully
stepping
obscured.
into?
Yeah. So
and then there's this expansion from the change rooms, the communal change rooms, into the lounge,
and then into the sauna.
Yeah, it just continues to expand with your experience. So the customer journey is, you come in into the unassuming front desk, into the communal change rooms with personal change rooms. We wanted to make sure that people still had, their own changing rooms and such, and personal showers. And it's kind of the bridge between the world. So as you're coming down the escalator from Canary Wharf into this concrete jungle, you're going into this secret portal.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah, and suddenly there's this transition. There's a lot more natural materials everywhere. So a lot of terracotta and wood. And
Even steel, like metallic. We wanted to play with all the different elements. And a lot of the classes are designed around different elements depending on the theme of what we're trying to invoke. But yeah, so after the change room, you go into the lounge and you wait to be seated and or greeted. And then we have a beautiful like curtain that comes around, and it's almost this sense of like being held. Very like matriarchal womb cocoon conversation pit with the altar. And I really wanted to bring ritual into this because it is so important, and it is such a big piece of sauna culture. It's nothing new. Also, like, I just want to flat out say, like, nothing we're doing here is new.
Yeah.
I give all of my gratitude to like past ancestors and civilizations that have brought all of these stories that we're remembering again.
Yeah.
You know, we're just putting it into a different format. And yeah, so the journey begins at the altar. We'll either have like incense or Palo Santo burning, and then we'll introduce the session. The facilitator will introduce the session, talk about the importance of it. And a lot of the classes are based around nervous system regulation, chronic stress inflammation, moderating that, and how to optimize your life. And, you know, there's a lot of takeaways. There's a lot of education sprinkled throughout. It could be playful. It could be fun. It could be stress-inducing as well. That's the point. We're wanting to tap into all sides of the human experience. And yeah, the goal is for people to have these peak experiences that shift their state, and it's part of their healing journey, their daily journey, their daily ritual routine, and creating a sense of community without needing to go to the pub. Or like, I think people are just looking for different ways to connect on a deeper level. And what's so beautiful about contrast therapy is that it takes away a lot of the masks, the watches, the ego, the layers of personality, and we get into the humanness of one another, and we realize we're actually the same. And
give you a sense of community and togetherness.
I think especially after COVID, we really need true connection.
Well, we've talked about this on the podcast before, and I mean, it's probably become a bit of a trope that I'm saying every so often. But like, you know, here in the UK, we had religion and the church, we had pubs, and we had what I always call the Village Green Preservation Society, so like local community groups in villages and stuff. And obviously with the rural to urban migration, with industrialization, with society here moving much more secular, and with the most young people not having the urge or the access to the finances to go to the pub all the time. You know, in my parents' generation, like you could go to the pub every day, and now, like, if somebody said to me, "Oh, yeah, I go to the pub every day," I'd be like, "Okay, maybe you're an alcoholic, or maybe you just got a lot of money to burn." And because those aspects of the community are gone, and you know, people spend all day connected to technology, and then they go home and they're connected to technology. You know, there is that great level of, even though we all live closer together and more connected than ever, you know, that sense of loneliness. And you know, some of the sad to say it, but some of the loneliest people I know, who are my friends, live in London, and they're surrounded by people and communities and things they could do, but they're the ones who feel perhaps the least connected. And that's so different when sauna and contrast bathing is involved.
I find it an antidote to most of our current problems in society right now. The loneliness, chronic stress, inflammation, digital world, you know, it just finds like a lot more of a moderate way of living and a respite to a lot of these things that we're still adapting to and evolving to.
Yeah.
Right. Going back to the, hormetic stress, that's chronic stress that we have to mitigate now. And there's even a crazy study that I think came out last year comparing the inflammatory markers and lifespan markers to when you're lonely. It's equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Yeah.
Because of the inflammation that comes with that.
Yeah.
And the cascades.
That's why old people with dogs live longer, right? Because they're not as lonely.
Right.
So, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So to me, it's like it's a medicine for so many different reasons, even like circadian rhythm optimization, sleep-wake optimization.
Yeah.
Huberman always talks about it,
Yeah.
but, grounding in the morning, sunlight, cold exposure, all of these things that naturally increase our cortisol and norepinephrine for focus, for energy first thing in the morning, as opposed to, screen time late in the evening or afternoon. All of these things can be optimized through contrast therapy.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and I always say to people, after sauna and cold plunge, you'll sleep like you haven't slept since you were a teenager. And particularly if you strike the balance well.
Yeah.
If you finish and you're too hot, then you might be sweating all night, and if you finish and you're too cold, you might be shivering all night. But that's normalization is such an important part of that, and that's something when you go to the Ark, you've got the heat, you've got the cold, and then you've got that space to actually normalize and ready yourself to return back to the crazy mad world outside. So
yeah,
great. So you've got regulars, people who go quite often. We were talking before, it's also a bit of a destination with it being the UK's largest sauna. How are you seeing the demographics, the groups of people, etc.? Is there certain groups of people that you see more there, or is it complete homogeny?
I mean, it's kind of too soon to tell because we're like only 2 months old, but I think we've been really surprised at the volume off the get-go. We didn't really think that it would be this high in demand.
Are you always fully booked?
I think like in the peak times, like in the evenings, it's pretty high right now, and the weekends.
Wow.
The socials, Arc After Dark.
Yeah.
It's really fun with like the DJs. And,
yeah. So that's something that's a little bit different to your usual offering, right? That's sort of in the evenings you guys get DJs in.
Yeah, and really fun music, and still the Aufguss rituals and such. But yeah, we're like thinking of different ideas with like non-alcoholic cocktails, and I think like the non-alcoholic wave is just starting. It's just ramping up, and again, people are looking for different ways to connect, and so those ones are pretty high. Classes, people are really interested in classes and learning, and having a lunch break at the sauna.
Yeah. Are you getting people that are, because you're based in Canary Wharf, right? So are you getting people who are in big glass tower blocks and coming to Arc for lunch and going back to work?
Yeah, there's some suits coming in.
Yeah.
There's starting to get word. Yeah. So that's one of the
cool.
reasons why we were interested in opening in Canary Wharf. It's the epicenter of the economic system, right? Like there's so many, there's so much flow. I also can't help but look at Canary Wharf as like such a space of like there's so much water and canals, and there's a lot of like flow, which kind of goes with.
But also there's an audience there that maybe don't realize, but they need it as well. They need it. Like
totally.
when we were working there, there was towards the end with the push to get ready for the launch, there was some late evenings, and I'd always be amazed that as I was leaving, looking to find some food and go back to some accommodation, there'd be people in suits that were just popping down to grab some dinner, and then they were going back up in the lift back to the office.
Yeah.
And it's not sustainable. You need a bit of a blow off valve,
Recharge.
a bit of a
Yeah, and I think what we're offering, the 50-minute class slots, or the flows, I think those are the most enticing, and also it's the best for that crowd too, 'cause it's a quick in and out. The weekends you could spend a bit more time, but we wanted to make it accessible from a price point. We compare it to having like 2 drinks at a pub, right? And getting a better high from a dopamine perspective. But yeah, I think it's the crowd that needs it the most that's making massive decisions in this world. And one of the things that I love to do is make change on a systemic level. And I find that this is disruptive enough to do that for people. And we know we're in a massive shift in consciousness, in life, like within the world. There's an undeniable shift that's happening. And I find that this is a huge piece in supporting that within people. And, even the amount of chronic stress, inflammation, mental health disorders, like this supports all of that and helps you find a way to mitigate and manage that.
So what's next for, I know you're only 2 months in, but what's next for ARC? What does the evolution of the concept look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're looking at different locations. We're looking at expansion. Where that is, I don't know yet. But I think for us, the most important thing is to get the product right and get that data and build out the brand, build out the workshops, the community. I think the biggest focus for me is having and creating a sense of community within the facilitators. Again, empowering facilitators. Like for me, when I'm onboarding and training certain facilitators, it's really important that they have autonomy over what they know and what they've learned. And I always say there's the masculine structure of the class and there's the feminine flow and creativity. I don't want to script them. I want them to channel and bring their expertise and their passions into it so that it's authentic and embodied. And that's something that I really want to build out within the community, is a sense of embodiment and education.
And then you're back to Canada to finish off your PhD
or
research?
Good question.
Yeah.
So I'm in a really fun shift right now, actually, with the next step in my PhD, but I'm finishing up the preclinical study of psilocybin on neurogenesis and neuroplasticity in the brain, and also taking blood inflammatory biomarkers and also measuring cortisol. So I'm finishing up the animal study, and I'm actually going to finish my PhD in London.
Okay.
This is really new, and like names still need to be signed, but I'll be finishing my PhD at University College of London.
Okay.
In the Center of Consciousness and Meditation, and I'm going to be studying. I'm going to do a study at ARC.
Okay. Yeah. So you're bringing it into the research.
Yeah. So I'm my worlds are converging even more, and I'll be looking at some different measurements.
Yeah.
Physiological measurements, some cognitive assessments, questionnaires. Yeah.
So,
about experience and
I'm really looking forward to seeing how this all evolves, and I can see, as I said before, you guys are absolute trailblazers. So if people want to get involved or come and see you guys, they can go on your website, right?
Yeah, website ARC Community or Instagram ARC Community.
Yeah. And do you guys have any YouTube or anything like that at the moment?
Still building that out.
Still building it. Okay, well, stay tuned. Yeah. Well, thank you. This has been amazing, Alanna. So nice to see you and hear that it's such a success. So, yeah, eagerly looking forward to seeing how you guys get on.
Thanks so much for coming up and visiting.
Thanks so much for having me.
Cheers.
This was
Thank
great.
you. Thank you.